I want to continue a conversation that we began having yesterday about gay marriage, because not only did the conversation follow the radio show, which is, by the way, a good thing, when a conversation gets started and then it follows on various other social media outlets or face-to-face or via email. But also, I want to tell you the news, because there's a lot of news with respect to gay marriage. And if you're somebody who is an advocate of gay marriage, you'll be happy to know that today was a big day in the United Nations. For the first time ever, the Human Rights Council, which is not exactly known for human rights, voted to commission a study on discrimination among gay and lesbian and transgender people. Now you say, well, that doesn't sound like much, but actually it's historic, because most of the countries in Africa are adamantly opposed to anything that might condone gay rights. They prefer discrimination against gay people because they see the behavior as an abomination unto the Lord and as a complete transgression of their religious principles. So they're not interested in expanding or looking at the role of discrimination in society. In fact, the opposite is true. They'd like to keep their laws exactly as they are. So it was a very big victory. In addition to the coalition with African countries, you have a coalition of conservative Islamic countries who feel the same way. So it was a very big day, and I will give you some more facts. Let me see if I can find it here. But it was a very big day to understand that in the UN, led by the European Union, the United States, and many Latin American countries, particularly Brazil, this passed. It takes a long time to change people's attitudes, myself included. I think it takes many people a long time to change very sort of inborn attitudes that are based on Scripture. And let me just tell you that a little bit of this. It says, the Human Rights Council narrowly voted in favor of the resolution put forward by South Africa, of all places, against strong opposition from other African and Islamic countries. And there were 47 members in this coalition, but Russia, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, and Pakistan voted against it. China abstained. The resolution passed with 23 votes in favor and 19 against. Backers included, as I said, the United States, the European Union, Brazil, and other Latin American countries. One of the origins of the resistance towards helping to eradicate discrimination against gay people comes from the Old Testament, in which it says right there in the black and white, at least as translated in the Hebrew to English translation I've seen, that it is an abomination unto the Lord to engage in certain behavior, and included in that behavior is a list of bestiality and all kinds of acts, and it says, men sleeping with other men, women sleeping with other women. It's pretty much in black and white. And there's an awful lot of literal interpretation of the Bible that modern people frankly ignore and frankly don't feel is relevant anymore, including stoning people for adultery and all kinds of biblical injunctions that are in the Old and New Testament that people feel are outdated, not only not relevant, but cruel and no longer relevant. But there are some people who go back to the words of the book, and they have problems with behavior that they see is antithetical to their religious traditions. And so moving this to New York City, to New York State, right now, as of yesterday, New York State was one Senate vote away from passing gay marriage. And New York would be, if it does pass gay marriage, the largest state in terms of population to pass gay marriage. We here in Connecticut were one of the first states to go along with civil unions, which is a contractual civil arrangement between gay people. And then also we are now one of the first to pass gay marriage, upheld by our Connecticut Supreme Court, and not opposed by Governor Rell when she was governor, and certainly not by Governor Malloy as governor, who, by the way, is a devout Catholic, Governor Malloy. But he is in favor of gay marriage, strongly so. And interestingly enough, Governor Cuomo of New York, also a devout Catholic, is strongly in favor of gay marriage. So just because you were born into a faith that teaches you one thing doesn't mean that out in the political sphere of your life, you can't disagree with your church on those teachings and fight for something else. So It is by no means what I'm saying. It is by no means all the Catholics that are opposed to gay marriage, even though the Catholic Church is opposed to gay marriage, as are ultra-Orthodox rabbis, as are imams, as seem to be many people of faith that rely on literal interpretations of their scripture for their faith. So right now, what's happening in New York is that people are getting nervous that assumed that this bill would be defeated. All of a sudden, New York, they're now paying attention because it looks like the bill will pass. So because of that, there are protests in Albany, and there is a lot of one-to-one political hand-wringing and wrangling that is going on right now to try and persuade various legislators not to vote for this. But I don't know at this point, at 4:15, how it's going to end. But I do want to say that yesterday I was talking about my only ambivalence with respect to passing gay marriage, which has nothing to do with discrimination against gay people. In other words, I would like to see all discrimination against gay people completely eradicated from law and from reality. I would like to state that emphatically. But my only ambivalence came as my law background and training with what it means to redefine marriage. Just simply like, in other words, as a foot in the door to redefining marriage in other ways. But I want to give the flip side of that. And the flip side of that, which I didn't get to discuss with you yesterday, is that to me the most strong, the most compelling argument to permit and to condone, in other words, to support gay marriage, is if you believe that there are certain people who are born gay. If you believe in your heart of hearts that you know people in your life who were born this way, that's why we came in with Lady Gaga, who were born this way, who didn't choose a lifestyle, who didn't do anything that would indicate a volitional will, but who was simply born gay, then I think you have to support gay marriage. Because if people are born the way they're born, it's just like being born black or white, it becomes a civil rights issue. It's a civil rights issue. If you're born a certain way, you should be allowed to behave in a legal way consistent with all other citizens that are born that way. If you're born disabled, you should be able to have access to elevators and airports, right? We already know this. That's why we have our handicapped access rules. If you're born a minority color, in which you have been historically discriminated against, then we needed to eradicate laws to get rid of that discrimination. And so the same thing is, if you were born gay, we need to do everything possible to eradicate discrimination in the law. And I think that that may be the crux of some people's reluctance or resistance when it comes to supporting or opposing gay marriage. Because there are people who believe that not everybody was born that way that chooses to be that way. And they judge them. And they judge them harshly. And they say, well, you don't have to act that way. And you weren't born that way. And because you don't have to act that way and because you weren't born that way, we don't want to reward you for acting that way by allowing you to marriage. I mean, this is an argument of some people. It's not my argument. This is an argument that some people make. But that argument is a fallacy if you study science, or if you know in your own personal anecdotal life, and if you truly believe that there are some people who are born gay. Maybe not all people who practice a gay lifestyle were quote-unquote born this way. There might be people that choose. I know some women in my life that have been through gay phases that were unfortunately raped by men and could not handle a loving relationship with a man. And went into loving relationships with women, sometimes for 5 or 10 or 15 years, and then went back or went to a different way and became heterosexual and got married because they were more comfortable at that point with their sexuality, and they had done a lot of therapy to get over their fears and resistance and distrust of men. But that's not all lesbians. That's just some that I happen to know. So it's a slippery slope. It's a complicated issue. But I don't think it's complicated if you believe that people were born gay. Because if you believe that you know people in your life that were born gay, then I think you have to advocate on their behalf to be able to get married. We'll go to Dawn from Norwalk on 44. Dawn, go ahead, please.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I have 2 uncles, one on either side that are gay, one who was gay from the womb and one who was not. He was an adult and grown and whatever. I don't know where it comes. No person would ever choose to be. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think a person would naturally choose to be gay. I think they are or they're not, because it's such a hard life.
I think that's a fair point, Dawn. I think that's a very fair point. It is a hard life. Yeah.
Nobody wants it. You know, you're, as a child, you're ridiculed. As an adult, you're shunned in some cases. Maybe not so much now, but nobody wants it. I have a 70-year-old uncle who still is very quiet about it. You know.
Well, from that generation, there was so much shame associated with it. It's a whole different mindset.
Yeah, but I just think But then again, I go back to I don't think that gay marriage is right.
You don't think it's right. So tell me, what is your resistance? I understand it, but can you put it into words? What is your resistance?
Just that marriage is between a man and a woman.
Okay.
And it's not, and if you start changing it, then, you know, civil unions gave everybody the rights. There was no need to, if you have a civil union law, then you have no need for the marriage rules. I mean, I don't think that there's any difference.
Well, and yeah. Well, I know that
maybe I'm wrong.
I once interviewed a gay couple, a woman gay couple on the show, and I asked them, why aren't you satisfied with civil union? Because this was one of the plaintiff couples in the historic case that came before the Connecticut Supreme Court. And they said, you know what, it's not really about X marks the spot in the law. We want to be treated as married people. We don't want people to see a boundary between our relationship and heterosexual relationships.
But for people who are going to see the difference, calling it marriage isn't going to make the difference. For people who don't see the difference, who don't care about the difference, then it's not going to make calling it marriage or not calling it marriage isn't going to make the difference. It's all about, you know, you're not going to change some minds. Some people are always going to be horrible, and they just always will be. You can't change that.
Well, you know, people thought that about affirmative action and discrimination, too. And you may be right. It may take 20 or 30 years, but eventually you may change people's minds. Dawn, I'm going to move on.
But all those things haven't changed either. There's still bigots out there, too.
Yeah, but hopefully a lot fewer than there were. Let's move on. Dawn, thank you for calling. Mary from Stamford, you got to be real quick because we got to go to a hard news break.
Okay, well, listen, they've made some very good comments, and I agree with the caller before you that marriage has always been between any ages, between a man and a woman. And to call it a civil union, or whatever you want to call it, a doody-do, whatever it is that you want to call it, there is a difference. Because marriage has always been between a man and a woman. Whether you're 70 or whether you're 30, when you think of marriage, you think of the word marriage as between a male and a female. And between, you know, I'm as liberal as they come. But, you know, we've always had these discrimination things, even though we've had civil rights. I'm a teacher. And believe me, we have Caucasoid, we have Hispanic, we have African American, we have white, we have, you know. And as long as you do that, instead of calling it, they're just not people. You know, we have an African American man, we have a white man. People don't, they just differentiate in so many other ways that what's the difference if it's marriage or it's a civil union? You know, it's just the way things are in this world.
So it's going to take another
100 years, Lisa.
Okay.
To balance out, I think. But it was a very good discussion.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks so much for participating in it.